Folks wanted to know how the underfunding of Black schools and communities could create a pipeline of low-wage labor that could be used to prop up corporate profits. So let's get into unpacking that a bit. So this question of creating a pipeline of low-wage labor is a huge question, but I want to focus on the fact that the question started with talking about underfunding Black schools. And so I want to talk a little bit about like what education does in the labor market, because I think that helps us kind of understand what underfunding a school might do to contribute to creating this low-wage workforce that the question is talking about. So an educational credential, what the degree often does within a capitalist economy is that it allows one access to more bargaining power. If you have a college degree, you can show that to an employer, and that essentially allows you to command a higher wage. Same thing with a high school diploma. It is a way of sorting the workforce into folks who essentially can command different wages. What that means is, to the extent that a degree is exclusive, that is going to allow one to command an even higher wage. For a long time, having access to a high school diploma was enough. Then it kind of moved to say that now you kind of need a bachelor's degree. And that was the sort of exclusive degree that allowed you to have more bargaining power. That's starting to shift even now as higher education becomes more accessible. So now folks are starting to say, oh, you need a master's degree. So this is sort of ratcheting up of what degree you kind of need to command that wage. So if you are trying to maintain a population of low wage workers, one way you could do that is through indeed underfunding the schools in that area. If you can make it such that folks don't have access to the degree that would command a higher wage, that is one way of locking in a group of low wage workers. Now, there's also a skills component to education, but for many jobs and many occupations, most of that training happens on the job through the doing of the job, because again, many workplaces are not doing formal training anymore. But the point is, the educational process is not necessarily preparing you to do any specific job. And I don't want to make it seem like I don't like education. I love education. But the point in many cases of getting access to a degree is that it gives you that access to bargaining power. And so if you can limit that, that's going to limit the extent to which a population gets access to that greater amount of bargaining power, and it allows those wages to remain lower than they would otherwise. Now, to stay on education for just a little bit, there are also several ways that Black folks are constrained in their ability to be able to translate getting access to higher education into the returns that would come from being able to use that degree for bargaining power. One way is when access to higher education becomes more and more resource limited. That is to say that it becomes more expensive to get access to a certain degree, so you need wealth to be able to access the thing that is supposed to get you more income in the future. This is happening right now through the limiting of things like Pell Grants, through the restriction of federal funding that would go towards universities, the restriction of funding at the state level, slashing race-specific and race-based scholarship programs. Those sorts of attacks are all making it more difficult for folks to access higher education. And so folks may indeed have to go into more debt to get access to that degree. And of course, what's happening in the Department of Education, making it more difficult to get student loans forgiven, making the conditions under which you are made to pay back those student loans more stringent. These are also interfering with that process of economic mobility, of being able to get access to a degree and then use that degree to command a higher wage. If you now have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to get access to the degree in the first place, that's going to limit the extent to which that investment is going to be profitable, right? Or lucrative over time. In addition to that, when Black folks enter the labor market, they already face wage discrimination. So already the extent to which that degree is going to be valuable is limited just by the conditions that they are entering into the market. And so you have the degree being more difficult to get access to, more expensive to access, more expensive to pay back over time. And on top of all that, the degree does not command the same wage as it would if it were held by a white person. There have been many studies such that a Black person with a high school diploma would have the same returns in terms of access to a job as a white person with a criminal record. And so that is some of the impact of just like Blackness in the labor market. And it's another way that education does not necessarily serve the same economic benefit for a Black person as it does for a white person. Now, that's not to say, again, that education is not worth it. It may indeed be the only option in many cases, but the extent to which it is valuable or as valuable is just limited due to discrimination and due to many of the hurdles that folks have to clear in order to get access to that degree in the first place.